and she has a bachelor's degree in English studies with a pathway in literature in English and a master's degree in comparative literature and literary studies from the University of the Basque Country. She's currently a PhD student here at Comparative Literature and Literary Studies program, and she's working on her thesis titled Through Colonized Eyes, How Japanese Popular Culture Occidentalized the Anglo-Saxon Archetype of the British Butler. Her research focuses on the cultural interactions between Western and East Asian countries, particularly Japan, and her presentation today is titled A Genealogy of Death, the Japanese Shinigami, and its transcultural origins. So the floor is yours now.
Hello. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction. As you can see by the title, I'm going to be talking about death. I understand that this is a pretty sensitive topic lately, so if any of you feel like overwhelmed, you can just leave the room. That's okay. I mean, okay. So with that, we can get started. The Shinigami is a figure that is usually perceived as the Japanese god of death. When I cannot move this. Why can't I move it? Oh, now it's moving. What is happening?
Try again, if it works now.
Okay, now it works. Nice. As you can see, the word Shinigami is formed by two kanjis or ideograms. The first one means death, and the second one means kami. Kami is the way in which people in Shinto religion refer to their spirits, deities, divinities. Usually it is translated to God, so you can see how, in terms of translation, Shinigami is easily understood as the god of death. So by the use of this term kami, one may think that this figure belongs to the folklore or the myth of Japan because it includes the term that is used to refer to Japanese deities. Actually, this is not true. When I was wondering where this came from, I didn't find a single mention of this in any of the more typical religions in Japan. That is Shinto, that is the native animist religion of Japan, and Buddhism. So I asked myself, why is it then that we have this perception that this is the god of death? Well, I didn't find him in folklore or myth, but I did find it in popular culture. So I would like to talk to you a bit about Japanese popular culture. There is a term called Japan that is used to refer to anything that a foreigner may identify as cool about the country. This includes games, comics, anime, well, cartoons, fashion, food, whatever. And in the last years, the Japanese government has placed a lot of emphasis on producing this sort of products as a way to increase their sphere of influence. And that is why many of these products are made to cater both to a national and an international audience. So perhaps you can see why, from an international perspective, when you see the translated version of these comics or these cartoons, it is translated to God of Death, and that is why internationally we get that feeling. But as I said, there's no record in the native religions of Japan of this figure, of this god. There is no god of death. So I asked myself, what is it exactly that make all these characters that appear in these popular culture products Shinigami? As you can see at first glance, they all look very different. I did find that they have two things in common. First, that they were associated with the process of death, and second, that they kind of look anthropomorphic to a certain extent, because some of them have like 6 arms, and that is not very anthropomorphic. What really is the difference between all these characters is the role they have in the cosmovision of each story. Still, I was able to find that there were some motifs that appear repeatedly in different mediums. One would be the Shinigami as a hitman, as something that kills humans. The second one would be the Shinigami as a bureaucrat, as something or someone that ensures that souls receive judgment when they die. And third, the Shinigami as a psychopomp, as a neutral figure that transports souls to the afterlife. So after finding this out, I thought, well, even though we don't find the Shinigami in the religions, maybe there is a connection, because after all, one of the terms that is used to refer to it is kami. So I cannot just neglect religion because I can't find him in the texts. So I thought it would be useful to make a timeline of religions in Japan and relate it to the appearance of the Shinigami and how these two may be interconnected. So as you can see, by the mid-16th century, we have 3 religions in Japan. We have Shinto, the enemy's native religion, Buddhism, that came from China in the 6th century, and Christianity, that was brought by Portuguese and Spanish missionaries around the mid-16th century. Almost 60 years afterwards, Christianity was prohibited. That is not to say that it completely disappeared. In fact, we know for a fact that there were a lot of people practicing the religion, and there were even Jewish people. So, but Judaism wasn't really that big as compared to Christianity. It is after Christianity is prohibited that we find the first instance of the first mention of a Shinigami, and it is in a play by Tsikamatsu Monzaemon. Well, this man is a very, very famous playwright. The Shinigami in this play is almost an anecdotal character. Its job is just to induce people to suicide, and then just he pops out just as soon as he pops in. It's a very plain character, and we don't really know much about them, aside from the fact that they induce characters to death. Then the next mention of the Shinigami is in a book of illustrations called the Yehoniakumonogatari. This is almost more than a century after the first mention. In this case, we do have a picture. I'm not sure if you can see it very well. And we also have an explanatory text that tells us that the Shinigami is a yokai, or a monster that can cause people to commit suicide. So we have once again that union with suicide. But once again, it is a very plain character, and more than one particular god, it identifies a category of beings. This contrasts, for instance, with the identification of the goddess of the sun, who is Amaterasu. So I would say that this plainness of the characters can be explained by the period they appeared in. They appeared in a period called Sakoku, which means locked country. This is to say that Japan was very isolated from other countries, and the influences of Western cultures were very controlled. So Christianity, being a Western religion from the point of view of the Japanese, any manifestation that was remotely related to Christianity would have been shut down. So I would say these are plain characters because the authors couldn't afford to develop the character more, using as basis maybe Christianity, that was the novelty at the time. However, by the end of this period and the legalization of Christianity, we do see the first Shinigami that is a round character, and in fact, he works as an antagonist. The reason why I have stressed the importance of Western influence is because this first instance of around Shinigami, again in a play by a very famous playwright, Sanyu Teiencho, is said to be an adaptation of a tale by the Grimm brothers, Godfather of Death. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that tale. So it seems that Western influence really did have a very big role in creating the Shinigami as we know it. After this, Japan entered another period of anti-Westernism. During this time, Shinto was declared the official religion of Japan. As you can see, the years are roughly the First and the Second World War. At those times, Japan was at war with Western powers, so once again, anything that looked remotely Western would be prohibited, would be censored, would be controlled. So to me personally, it's not a surprise that this character doesn't appear. And then after World War II, we get a freedom of religion and of cultural manifestations, which coincides with the gradual popularization of the Shinigami as an archetype in popular culture. If you know a bit about anime and manga, you will know that at this time there was just a huge boom, and you could find anything, and that is why you could find also the Shinigami. Okay, so now we have identified the possible sources of the possible religious sources of influence. I would like to relate these sources with the main motives I discovered in my research. Okay, so first would be the hitman that I have related to Shinto. In Shinto, we do not have a god of death. We do, however, have a myth that tells us about how death came to be. This is the myth of Izanami and Izanagi. Izanami and Izanagi are the creators of Japan. Izanami is the wife, Izanagi is the husband, and they are siblings because this is a myth and incest. So what happens is that Izanami died, and Izanagi went to hell to rescue her. But he was very shocked to find that she was half decomposed because she had spent quite a lot of time in hell. So he got spooked, he turned heel, and he blocked the entrance to hell with a boulder so that she couldn't follow. Logically, Izanami was a bit upset about this, and she decided that as revenge, she would strangle 1,000 humans every day. And that is the origin of death. So I asked myself these questions. According to this myth, death is caused by Izanami, and it is caused because she needs to fill a quota. She needs to kill 1,000 people every day. However, in practice, you will not find death assigned to any particular kami. This is because kamis are said to abhor death and blood because they are forms of pollution. So in practice, death is not the realm of action of a god. It is just something that happens. It's a natural event, and it doesn't really have an explanation. However, we can get a bit of a characterization of death in Shinto religion. First, we can tell that it is a form of pollution. That is precisely why they cannot be directly associated with kami. Second, it is artificially irreversible because before Izanagi decided to place the boulder there at the entrance of hell, people could just come in and out. So death is artificial. It is completely detached from human experience. It has nothing to do with humanity. It has more to do with the fact that a marriage had a falling out. So, and it is characterized as a murder because it is said that Izanami strangles humans. So you may see how this is related to the job of a hitman, the job description. A hitman kills people for money. It is considered to be a morally polluting activity because, well, you are committing murder. And the hitman is many times completely detached from the existence of the person they are killing. They are just like a list, they are filling a quota, just like Izanami. Okay, so the second would be Buddhism, which I have associated with the bureaucrat. Once again, in Buddhism, we don't have a god of death. We do have a god of dead, like the difference between Hades and Thanatos in Greek mythology. This god is called Enma in Japan. It is worth noting that he has a different name because Buddhism is in very different regions, and in each region the name changes a bit. But well, Enma is the name he is given in Japan. So Enma is the Lord of Hell. His job is to provide judgment to souls once they have died to determine what will happen in the next cycle of the Samsara. The Samsara is the cycle of death and rebirth, what we usually understand as reincarnation. So, according to this myth, who causes death? Really no one. Death is not seen as caused by someone. It is more like a consequence of the fact that we are souls, and as souls, we are in this cycle of the samsara. We are forced to die and be born again and again and again until we arrive to nirvana, but that's a completely new thing. So, according to this, what is death? Death is a part of the system. It is a stage, a temporary stage, until you pass to the next stage of the cycle. This next stage would be a judgment, and depending on how you have behaved in your life, it may lead to suffering. If your actions have not been carried out with morality in mind, you will suffer. If not, well, you will just be reborn as whatever Enma decides. You may see how this is a bit related to popular perceptions about the bureaucrat and bureaucracy. The bureaucrat works at a stage in a process. When you are with one bureaucrat, you are at one stage temporarily until you move on to the next stage of the process. Well, not to tell that bureaucracy is included in our judiciary system, and many times it is considered to be something that is a great source of suffering because it is very slow. So this is just a joke. A very bad joke, but well, can't be helped. And finally, Western tradition and the psychopomp. You may remember that I mentioned a book by, well, a tale by the Grimm brothers. This tale is called Godfather Death, and it has as sort of antagonist as death. The antagonist is death or the Grim Reaper. The thing is that this figure comes from a multitude of cultural sources, and I thought that asking these questions would be futile because I would get thousands of answers, and many of them would be contradicting each other. So this is kind of pointless. I thought that a better question to ask is, what new things does this figure contribute to the process of death? Well, first, the idea that when you die, souls need to be transported to the afterlife. Prior to this, both in Buddhism and in Shinto, there is no notion that a soul needs help to get to the afterlife, except for the souls of the babies, but this is explained because babies are helpless in life, and so in death, as souls, they are also helpless. And this is where we get the psychopomp. Second, the animagery that is still in use today. You can see how this Grim Reaper looks very similar to the image I have placed here. And third, an identity. The fact that death is not just a natural event. Death is the realm of action of a god with an identity. And this brings us back to the etymological composition of the word. Shinigami, kami of death, god of death. So, now that we have done all this, what can we conclude for certain? Well, first, that the Shinigami is not a creation of the myth, of the mythology of Shinto or Buddhism. It is a modern invention by popular creators. And because it appeared like in the 18th century, that's pretty recent. Second, that it comes from a combination of cultural and religious traditions. And third, that although we cannot assume that the appearance of Western tradition originated the Shinigami, it was the trigger that changed it enough so that we can recognize it now as it is. So in short, the Shinigami is a transcultural figure. And well, here you have a big illustration of what the Shinigami looked like in the 19th century. This is the first illustration we have, quite different from others we have seen. And this would be it. This is my corpus, this is my bibliography, and thank you very much for listening. Okay.
Thank you, Natalia. It was a very interesting. You look as if you had been doing this for a really long time. So congratulations. And now I just open the floor for the Q&A. And those at home, also feel free to raise your hand or to type your questions. Okay, Raul again.
Hi, again, this is me again. Okay, so first of all, I was thinking one thing, and it's very close to your last comment. I was listening to the three speakers, and I can see you as our students, but almost as unequals. I mean, you are like nowadays proper academics, so very well done, very well constructed the presentations, and we are very proud again. And yes, I'm going to let time for the rest of the audience for your questions. But one question just is food for thought for David mainly, right? Because you have started speaking about metaphysical poetry and so on, and maybe, I don't know if you agree or not, I miss a reference to probably metaphysical poetry or John Donne, because, okay, romanticism was there, but there was something before. And moreover, when you have presented a comment about Barfield and Tolkien about inspiration, it is just a way of replicating what epic poetry presented about how inspiration was created, or moreover, Milton's Paradise Lost, when he asks for inspiration to God, for that muse who is going to drive, his hands. So there was something before. And maybe just to keep it in mind can be handy for the future. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Marcena?
I have it's rather a comment, but also a question to Anna. H.G. Wells, which is the end of the 19th century, and then the interwar period, but in between the 19th century and the interwar period, you have the Great War. And I was wondering whether you were looking at the impact of the Great War upon monstrosity. I was thinking about the question of monstrosity in terms of physicality, that is the men or soldiers with the broken faces who were seen as monsters and were hidden from the society and were called gargoyles. And also the theme of monstrosity as the return to the beast theme in war fiction and film, like Liam O'Flaherty wrote the novel Return to the Beast. You have Eric Remarque, who also writes about soldiers and beasts. Have you been doing also this kind of study as a monstrosity, not in myth, not as a fiction, but in real life?
Yes. thank you so much for that question. It's very interesting because I haven't, so far, my research on Wells has been like limited to his early fiction, because apparently he has two different phases on his production. Those are the scientific romances of the late 19th century, and I think they end by 1901. And the rest of the fiction he wrote is more political, and maybe there are some of those topics you've talked about on those novels that they are. I know I haven't read them yet, but I know they are very didactic and very moralizing. So I wouldn't put it past him to tackle those topics. But I think it's a very interesting theme to explore because we've been talking about this sometimes before, about how this novel is also related to disability studies in some ways, because there's a lot of emphasis on how the beast folk aren't fully humans because they lack something, or because they don't exactly resemble the rest of society or the human model. So I assume that during those periods, people who came back from the war like as cripples or with some kind of impediments were also must have felt that kind of marginalization. So it's a very interesting connection, but so far I haven't researched on that. But thank you for the idea.
Always pushing everybody into the Great War.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Martin wants to ask something.
Yes, thank you very much to all of you who have been presenting this morning. Not only this panel, but a previous one as well. Endorsing the words that Raul has just addressed us with. I'm really proud of you all, and it's just great to listen to such good academic performance here today. Now, I think that it's a good opportunity perhaps to expand now, just very briefly, but still to let us know a little bit more about your current research. And this is more or less, to some extent at least, the basis for other types of research into other areas of knowledge within the same field, but still, I mean, could you all perhaps tell us very shortly where this original research will be taking you, will be leading you in the future? I'm sure the audience would appreciate that as well. Thank you.
So briefly, to explain our work. So I'm researching Tolkien and Tolkien's Middle-earth, and particularly looking at the natural parts of that Middle-earth is made of. And I'm using the Silmarillion as the background to understand not just what's the meaning of those places as the company or the fellowship goes through all the Middle-earth, right, from the Shire to Mount Doom, but to understand what's the metaphysical, what other layers of meaning we find in Middle-earth. And my argument is that Middle-earth is a character in itself, and very much has an important role to play. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So for me, this was a bit of a guinea pig, I guess. It is a bit of what I'm doing in my thesis, but on a smaller scale. What I want to do, as Amaya has already told you, is analyze how a British archetype is brought to Japan and how this changes the archetype. And I do it through the lens of post-colonialism. So for me, this is like the entry point to a very big mess I'm getting myself into, of demonstrating that we need to stop thinking about nationalities and cultures as close things only, like we need to understand that culture will always be a continuum, and that yes, for instance, the Shinigami is Japanese, but it's something we wouldn't have if, I don't know, if people in Japan hadn't read the Bible and had read the Apocalypse and thought of the pale horse, I think it's called, death. So yeah, for me this is the entry point to propose that we need to abolish all these barriers, that in a moment that everyone is very much focused on nationalism and what makes a culture, like for instance, what makes Spanish culture Spanish. We need to start seeing that every culture is hybrid. We live in a hybrid world, and we are not doing us any favor in pretending that it is a different way. That's it.
Well, mine is also deals about the hybrid, but in a different way. I do plan on expanding the topic I've talked about today in my PhD thesis, but I want to incorporate more contemporary works of science fiction, and that's the reason why I want to include all different kinds of hybrids. So, as we were mentioning before, I wanted to incorporate some posthumanism to my thesis, and talk also about the human/machine hybrid, or AIs, and those kinds of non-hegemonical identities, and how they are basically the overall topic would be to focus on how power asymmetries are, or how power structures are disturbed through these creatures, and how most of the times that is related through language, and how they are addressed, how they address themselves, and the power of naming things or calling something a thing itself. So, but I still haven't decided yet. I haven't even done I haven't done the paperwork to start the PhD itself. So I'm still thinking about it. Thank you.
Well, I think many of us can relate to or resonate with Natalia's words of like entering this big mess of doing the PhD. I'm still trying to find my way out, but here there's plenty of proof that there is a way out. So, yeah. Any final questions or thoughts? Okay.
Thank you. So I have just a quick question for Natalia. Is the archetype of the Shinigami, has it been manipulated in any way, in any political way? Has it been used by younger generations in any subversive way to make a political statement, or is it more like a popular icon? I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Oh, yeah. You spoke perfectly. I would say, well, first, for context, after World War II, the country has went downhill from the spiritual point of view. They had a very blocked vision of religion. So what happened afterwards is that there has been a very big proliferation of new views on spirituality. Personally, I think that the Shinigami is so popular because many times it mocks the idea of death. Many times they are like just comic characters. And they are comedic characters, but they are also inherently serious because they deal with a tough topic. So I haven't found any particular trend, but I don't think individual authors try to make points through these figures. For instance, if you are familiar with an anime that is called Death Note. Like, it's super famous right now. Like the philosophical baggage that the Shinigami have in that worldview is incredible. It is used to think about the ways the legal system treats people, for instance, in prison. Because I don't know if you know that in Japan